Hey guys, my name is Jay Wilson. I'm a content creator over at Data Crew, and I'm going to walk you guys through a question that I keep on getting from my developers, where they're asking, how can I dynamically update a connector, um, a Domo connector, based off of configuration settings that are stored in GitHub? The classic one is a lot of my developers are using Snowflake, and we're pulling data into Domo via Snowflake, and they're just like, hey Jay, how can I make sure the query for the connector manage it can be matches a configuration file in GitHub because they write all their code, you know, locally on their computers. They store that code definition in GitHub. They don't want to have to copy paste 17 um, connector settings into Domo. And so they're like, how can I do this automatically? Well, let's see if we can't understand how data sets work in Domo. So here's Domo. This is a JSON no-code connector. I don't have any SQL databases that I can just connect against, but the concept will still apply. Let me go ahead and inspect here, and we're going to monitor network traffic. Let me throw the refresh, or let me just hit settings and see what comes in. All right, this data set is called that. Now this is important. A data set speaks to how the data gets into the database layer of Domo, which is Adrenaline. And the data set will define things like the schema. This data set has 7 columns. The first column is type int, the last column is type string, the third column is type date time. Okay, that's all information that's associated with this data set ID. Cool. But the data set is abstracted from how did the data actually get into Vault or Amazon S3, and then how does that data get indexed into a data set? That's separate. And that is the stream. So let me see if I can find, let's start with our data set first. That's a post request. I want a get request. Do I have a get request? Let me see if I can't find a get request. Post, post, any gets? All right, here we go. So here, this API is just looking at information about the data set itself. Let's look at the response. The response tells me, hey, that's the data set ID. It's got a name. It's got a description. The data set has an owner. Does it tell me about the data provider? The data provider is of type JSON. So the data provider is synonymous with the connector. The connector, right? Remember, there's Domo has 1,000 different types of connectors. They've got SAP. They've got what? Jira. They've got I'm drawing all sorts of blanks. Snowflake, right? They have all sorts of data provider types. And each data provider has a template of configuration settings that you need to provide so that it knows how to retrieve data. And those settings are stored in the stream. So let's see if, okay, stream is not mentioned here. Bummer. Let's see what happens if I search for stream. Aha. So the stream 1658 tells us how the data gets into Domo, or the configuration settings anyway. So it's got stuff like what's your authentication information, what account are you using to authenticate, what data set do you dump all of the data into once you pull it from the APIs, and most importantly, I'm looking for the word configuration. Here we go. Here's the configuration. Um, and of interest to us is going to be JSON selection. So this object with name JSON selection, it says, hey, um, here. Shoot, where to go? Yeah. The JSON URL is to do number 7. Now again, imagine if instead of it being a JSON query, it was a SQL query, right? The value would actually be the SQL query that you want to dynamically change. to match whatever's stored in GitHub. So the real question is just how do I change this value? Okay, let's get into that. So here we are. First thing we're going to do is we're going to import some credentials. Fantastic, I authenticate. I'm just showing this here so that you have it in the back of your head. If you want to sync all of your data sets, right, you need a smart way of doing it. You can search the data center for all of the data sets that, for example, are a Snowflake account. In my case, I'm just going to demonstrate how I can search the Domo data center for anything that is a JSON connector or a JSON data provider. Cool. Run that query real quick and it tells me, aha, these are the first 5 data sets that are of type JSON. I happen to know the data set ID that I want to update, so I'm just going to extract the data set from the list of data sets. And so here's a quick printout of it. We can see just high level stuff about it, but I don't have access to the stream. Oh wait, here it is. The stream ID is 1658. Cool. So to update the stream, what we'll do is we'll have to run a function that gets the stream by ID 1658. And let's see a printout of that stream. Here is the stream. Most of the stuff I don't care about. The only bit I care about, like I said, is the configuration node, because the configuration node under JSON selection allows me to change the JSON URL. And again, instead of focusing on JSON, if this was a SQL query, that would have a parameter called query that I could then change and just change this value to be my select statement that I pulled from GitHub. Cool. How do we do this? From the stream, I'm going to just extract the configuration list so I can just work with that. From the configuration list, I need to find the node, the object, whose name is JSON selection, and I'm going to store that in an object called original object. Okay, so now I have my original object. Remember, the value here is of type string. I can tell that because it's surrounded by this single tick. So I'm going to use JSON load string to make it easier to parse and manipulate. So where am I? I'm going to create a new. I'm going to take my original object value, load it as a JSON, and then store it in a thing called value. And I can see that here. Here is the previously a string, now a JSON, and all I have to do is change this JSON URL to the value from GitHub, right? That was a dream. Sync it up with what's in GitHub. In my case, my configuration file happens to be on my local computer, new query.txt. There it is. And I'm going to change the value to 8. Cool. So all we're doing here is we're just reading in the config file, we're reading in the SQL query, printing it to prove that it exists, and then we're just going to update the new value with the new query. Then I'm going to create a new configuration node and dump that back into the stream configuration. Then all I have to do is run put command to update stream, passing in the updated stream. I got a 200 response. Let's see if Domo believes me. So this, if I press refresh, I should have a URL of 8. URL of 8. We win. If I go to history, does it show that I updated the configure? Oh, they changed it. Cool, Domo. All right. Yeah, so we can see here that I changed the configuration a minute ago. Guys, that's it. I hope that was useful. In this tutorial, I wanted to talk about how you can dynamically update a connector with settings stored in GitHub. I didn't actually talk about how do I store stuff in GitHub because I assume you can figure that part out. But the point is how can I use an API request to dynamically change a bunch of connectors? That was a tutorial. My name's Jay Wilson. Find me in the Slack group if you have any questions. Catch you guys later. Bye.